Activate Your Introvert, the weekly show to help leaders build performance by understanding introversion.
In this week's show, neighbours, and I don't mean the ones next door to you. Doctor who is regenerating. Question of the week, how should you manage introverts? And a discussion with Alison Charles. Alison, with her team, help clients achieve real resilience. She helps leaders create a focus on resilience, well-being, and stress management at work. Just before speaking to Alison, a scan of some recent news. Good neighbours can become good friends. Can you remember what you were doing when Kylie and Jason first hit our TV screens in the 1980s? Were you even around then? They're returning to Neighbours, now aged 53, for the final episode in June. Rather than thinking, what were you doing? What were you like? One thing we don't do often enough is credit ourselves with our journeys. On hearing that piece of news, my mind dragged back to the 80s. I'm a whole lot more socially comfortable, chatty and outgoing. Like many introverts, I've learned tactics to get around some of the downsides of being introverted. And yet, I still get peopled out at times, and I still think to talk. I'm pleased with my journey. How about you? Speaking of appearing on TV or reappearing on TV, David Tennant and Catherine Tate. They're making a reappearance on Doctor Who as Doctor Who is regenerating. Doctor Who discards his old body and becomes a new person from time to time. It left me wondering, who would you become if you could regenerate? What is it about that person who makes you want to regenerate to them? And how many of those aspects could you just bring into your existing persona? And some very odd news. A man has spent the past 6 years with his penis attached to his arm, has said he feels like a real man again now that it's been reattached to his groin. This really was in the news, guys. Malcolm McDonald's penis dropped off into a toilet in 2010. Doctors had to graft his replacement onto his arm because of a lack of oxygen in his blood. He said, "Can you imagine 6 years of your life with a penis swinging on your arm?" What's the introvert link here? It's ego and egotistical behaviours. There's not many people around who like other people's egotistical behaviours. The trouble is, those who behave like that don't often realise it, and those who hate such behaviour quite often go to extremes to behave in the opposite way and don't put themselves out as strongly as they could. How are you with your team? If you have many introverts in your team, my survey may be relevant. Introverts are more put off than most people by egotistical willy waving. Yep, there's your link. And it might mean, in fact I think it does mean, it's time to move on and talk to Alison. Welcome, Alison.
Hi, John. Thank you so much for having me today.
We'll cover resilience shortly, but just before we get into that, I always like to know, are you an introvert, an extrovert, and possibly more importantly, what does that mean to you?
I sit right in the middle. I'm an ambivert. So I have traits of introversion and I have traits of extroversion. When I get tired, I can still, like many introverts, need to sort of batten down the hatches, not talk to anybody, just be quiet and recharge my batteries and be on my own for a bit. But also as an extrovert, I love to be with people. I love to talk to people, and having a lot of people around me is also a lot of fun as well. If I think about, what else to me means the difference between an introvert and an extrovert, one of the main things that I notice having managed teams, the introverts, they won't necessarily speak up in a meeting, but when they do, they normally have something really significant to say because they've taken the time to think about it. So introverts tend to need a little bit of information up front, time to think and process. And then we'll come up with some really, really relevant comments as a result. Whereas extroverts, particularly in a meeting, will be quite comfortable just thinking and processing on the spot. So that's I think the main thing that I noticed when I ran teams.
That's brilliant. Thank you. So resilience seems like a buzzword of the moment. Does it justify all this attention?
Resilience, if you search at the moment, you'll see everything from government websites to business websites to coaches. Everybody is talking about resilience at the moment. And I think one of the reasons that it's become so much in vogue is because we have so much uncertainty in the last 3 years. COVID, from Brexit, now the war in Ukraine as well, and people just not knowing what tomorrow is going to bring. Everybody's talking about resilience because if you're resilient, it actually means you're able to cope with stress and uncertainty a lot better. You're more comfortable with ambiguity. You're more able to pivot. You're more able to move and transform to keep your company relevant, which is, I think, why a lot of people are talking about resilience.
Okay. In that sense, it's not just personal stress, as you just said there. It's about keeping the company resilient as well.
You've got personal resilience, you've got business resilience, financial resilience, organizational resilience, just about every aspect you can think of. You could talk about resilience from that aspect. The government are talking about making the country resilient for the future, not just talking about how to support people now, but actually building a resilient country that's more able to cope and support people in the longer term. So that's part of what resilience is as well. It's about being able to focus on the future.
So dealing with uncertainty, being future focused and moving towards a presumably good future. You just mentioned a number of types of resilience. What do you help people with?
I help people in 2 ways. So I help people with individual resilience, but I also help businesses with business resilience. So from a personal perspective, that would mean working on a one-to-one basis, looking at where people are at and helping them plan and teaching them some tools and techniques, looking at the mindset to actually achieve resilience, so how they can better cope with stress, how they can manage in a very uncertain world. And it's not too far away with the business as well. We start everything with what we call a resilience audit, actually taking stock and seeing where it is people are right now and where they want to be and how we can actually help draw a path from where they are for where they want to be in the future.
Do you think that team leaders, managers focus on their team's resilience enough?
Not at all. The managers are so stressed with so much workload themselves. It doesn't matter what industry you look at, everybody's struggling with resources, with employment issues, not being able to get the right people at the right time. Manufacturing, corporate, everybody is struggling with having enough people at the moment, but also trying to balance that against the income. And the problem is everybody gets so busy that they're just busy trying to keep their head above water, that they forget to take a step back and think about what could actually help. And managers typically are so busy trying to get their own job done and just, make sure the work's getting done. They can forget, especially when people are working virtually, that sometimes you just need to stop and find out where people are at and what they need.
Do you think that working from home changed how we need to manage resilience?
Definitely. Where you get that classic interaction by the water cooler, by the coffee machine, going to lunch together, you got a lot more conversations just happening to find out how people were doing. People's mental health is definitely suffering from not having that interaction. So as a manager, you actually need to think about what do you miss when you work virtually, and think about how to weave that into the virtual world, which means you actually have to have more touch points with people. You have to make time for those casual conversations and that check-in with people to see how they are. And that only comes if you're actually telling people where you're at. You can't expect people to share when you're not sharing yourself. It has to be a two-way discussion. People have to feel comfortable.
Yeah, it also touches on something I was saying a lot during lockdown, where people were saying working from home, it's introvert heaven. And I was saying, well, no, there's just as many introverts getting stressed as there are extroverts, and it's got nothing to do with that. And I think you just answered the why, because there weren't as many touch points, there weren't as much interactions as there needed to be. Is resilience more than stress? Is it more than stress?
Absolutely. To me, resilience is tools and techniques that actually help you manage stress, but it's also a mindset. But I mean, my business is called Real Resilience, which even a step beyond that. Yes, it's about the tools and techniques that we can use, and it's about managing our mindset. But real resilience is to me is actually living and breathing that as a way of life to be the best possible versions of ourselves that we can be on a daily basis, whatever that means, whether that means making time for self-care, learning and development of our own personal well-being, our careers. It touches every aspect of our lives. It's about conscious management of ourselves. And that's the difference between resilience and real resilience. It's that conscious effort. And it does take effort. It's not instant. It takes work.
Like any good management techniques, some people might just do them automatically, but when you do it well, it's a conscious effort. It's like going to the gym. I have to make a conscious effort sometimes, much as I don't like the idea.
And that's being resilient as well. It's mindset, it's physical health, it's emotional health, it's societal health. That interaction that you have with society and that feeling connectedness. And I think the point that you made earlier about, oh, this is introvert heaven, for everybody, there's that societal resilience. It's about that connection to people. And that's as important for introverts as it is for extroverts. It's not the quantity of conversations that you have, but it's being able to have those quality of conversations, which you need either way, whether you're introvert or extrovert, or like me, ambivert.
Do you think then that inwardly focused, quieter people are more likely to struggle with resilience problems?
I don't think so. I think it's the same for everybody. I mean, a lot of what we say when we talk about people struggling with resilience problems, we talk about people struggling with mental health. A lot of it is that quality of conversation that you have with others. That old saying, a problem shared is a problem halved, is very true. Everybody needs to be able to have people to talk to. It's the quality of the relationships as much for anybody.
So just because an extrovert might talk to 25 more people doesn't mean they're any better off, because the conversations might be shallower.
Yeah, they might be very superficial. Absolutely right.
You mentioned a moment ago about getting tired, and you put it in the context that can affect one's resilience. If an introvert spends a lot of time with other people, they're more likely to feel energy drained.
Correct.
Is that something that can affect their resilience then?
Definitely. It comes back to that self-care element, taking time for self-care, but knowing what you need, because everybody's different. There is no one size fits all. So it's making sure that you do set enough time aside to recharge your batteries. That's really important for an introvert.
Perhaps we could start to wrap up, and perhaps you'd give us a tip for an introvert to improve their resilience.
Knowing how it takes time to think about things and prepare for things. Just make sure, especially in a work environment, that you're giving yourself time to prepare, that you're cluing up your manager and saying, well, could I have information in advance? I'd really like to contribute into the meeting. I just need time to sort of mull things over and come up with a view. If you could send the agenda to me, any pre-read, a week or so in advance, you'll give me time to prepare, and then I will be able to help you by helping me and be able to respond accordingly.
So very much know what your introvert strengths are, and also what you need, and make sure your manager understands.
Absolutely.
What about a manager? A tip for a manager to improve resilience in their team?
That's a really interesting one, and particularly pertinent with people working remotely. People grow resilience by learning and developing themselves. And so it's down to the manager to give people that opportunity, trusting them to get on with the work, but equally being there to catch them if they fall and making sure that there's no blame. It's very much about growing that very open, honest support, because if you give people the opportunity to try things and experiment with things, the chances are they'll come up with an even better way of doing things. If you micromanage them, you'll just get what you always got. But it's really, really important that the manager also supports them when things go wrong, because when you try things, you just don't know whether they're going to work or not.
Good point. So exploring and failing is actually a good thing, as long as you do it in a non-destructive way, I guess.
Yeah, and it also helps people lose their fear of failure. Losing fear of failure is really one of those major techniques to building resilience, to feel comfortable in your own skin and trust that even if it doesn't work, that's absolutely fine.
Alison, it's been great to talk to you. How can people get back in touch with you?
We've got a great new website, real-resilience.co.uk. On there, you'll find all of the contact details.
Thank you. That's great. Wonderful to talk to you.
Thank you, John. Lovely to see you.
My takeaways from the discussion were: resilience is more than surviving. It's being adaptable and fit for the future. Working from home makes resilience harder. You need to make more touch points with your staff. The importance of telling people where you're at rather than just expecting them to open up. And we all need to talk to others at times, but quality is often better than quantity. What were your takeaways? Add to the discussion on the Facebook page, Activate Your Introvert. What would you like to know about introversion in business? This week's question is one I've been regularly asked. Do you get frustrated by quieter people in your team who don't seem to engage whatever you do? Many leaders ask how to manage introverts. Here's a few ideas to help you manage introverts and get more engagement and productivity in your whole team. But these same things will help with other people too. So, should you manage introverts differently? Yep, you should. To get the best out of the introverts in your team, communicate in a way that helps them engage and create a culture which is supportive. And no, you shouldn't be doing anything weird, just managing people so they perform better. Number 1. I've covered this one a moment ago. Ditch the ego. Most introverts don't like strong egotistical behaviour. Number 2. Understand introverts and how they prefer to work. Value your employees for who they are and what they can offer your firm, rather than how much they talk. Number 3. Allow people time to think before responding. This is especially true of introverts who have probably been trained that you're not interested in their answer when you answer for them, or allow others to. Number 4. Strive for a culture where everyone feels comfortable speaking up, listening to each other and sharing. That may mean holding back some of the louder voices in the team and helping everybody respect all communication styles. Number 5. Praise. Be specific in your praise, not just flattering. Help people see the components of a great job, rather than that they just did a good job. The same as you would with any member of staff, but helping people to see what the components are will help build their internal confidence. And number 6, don't try to change an introvert's personality to conform to your working style. It won't work. But then it won't work with other people either. What question would you like answered on the show? Whether you want to be on the show or just have your question answered, go to activateyourintrovert.co.uk, where there's a box for you to ask your question. You could also follow on Facebook and discuss the answers at the show's page, Activate Your Introvert.
I'm John Baker. Thank you for listening. I hope you found it useful. There's a new episode every Thursday at activateyourintrovert.co.uk and your favourite podcast provider. Till then, go be introversial, activating your introverts, building your business.